Preseason is over. Inside Black and Gold fans, Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak. We've made it. Exhibition play is a wrap, and pretty soon, week one will be upon us when the Saints host the Tennessee Titans. A lot to glean from the last preseason game, Jeff, and luckily overall, you always talk about want to escape things without injury, and I think for the most part, the team was pretty successful at that.
Yeah. There's been no major injuries, right? Like we've seen a fair number of soft tissue injuries, stuff like that. But the season-ending injuries were kind of kept to the fringe roster players anyway. Like a Trey Turner who was here for 2 days, and a special teams ace, and Andrew Dowell, and a backup running back, and Benjamin. So you didn't lose any.
Andrew Dowell was a stinger for sure.
Yeah, but he's not a starter.
No, not a huge name, right?
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll get into some notes from that in this first segment, and then we'll do the 3 up, 3 down in the second and third segment, as we've been doing in these post-game podcasts. Obviously, we're a little behind on this one as we were last week. The night games are going to be tough. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of them because, man, they tire me out. I got to sleep at 3 a.m. last night, and I wasn't even trying to. I didn't do anything. I went home, and I was just sitting there just coiled up like a snake.
Yeah, I don't know. Game, it's like the player, plus you're on the field and being so close to that action, there's still that adrenaline pumping.
Yeah, I'm not the type of person who can go home after a whole game and fall right asleep. But yeah, so I'm a little groggy. We're coming back at you. We're getting through it. It's a Monday. But yeah, so the first thing I do want to point out, and this is really nothing to do with the game, Mark Ingram, Deuce McAllister, Alvin Kamara got on the field for the Who Dat. They ramped this up. Deuce kept it a secret from us. He didn't tell me. I wasn't aware of it until about 15 minutes before it happened. So if you ever need to keep a secret, go tell Deuce. But I thought that was really cool. I got to talk to Mark as he came off the field. I have very high hopes for him as a broadcaster. Technically, he's not retired yet. He still wants to play if he can. But
really?
I think he's going to be excellent as a broadcaster. I think Cam's going to be excellent too. They had a podcast together, so there's a lot of evidence that they can do that sort of thing. But I never, I always wondered how Sean would transition to the broadcast jobs and how Drew would transition to the broadcast jobs, because I think at their core they're a little boring, or at least Drew is. I think Sean, if he wanted to stay in it, might have been able to do it. But Mark is just an interesting person, and he's interesting to listen to. And I'm excited to hear him on some of these broadcasts. I think he's going to have a long broadcast career.
Yeah, with Ingram, it's like, shoot, if he's ready to suit up, the Saints' depth at running back right now has taken a little bit of a hit. He might have been able to get some snaps yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but he still looks good. He hasn't lost that Mark Ingram stature.
Always a great talker too in the locker room. So definitely hoping and wishing the best for him. And I agree with you. I think he's one of those guys that's easily relatable to. Doesn't come off as a snooze or a bore, and folks want to hear more from him. Kind of thing. So yeah. Props to Mark and his trek on the broadcasting path.
Yeah, the difficult thing for players as they get into broadcasting is you have to kind of get off of that pulling punches everywhere kind of mentality. And that's tough for some guys to do. I think that's tough for Drew to do. You have to be critical of these guys who and you played against. And that can be tough for players. So I'm interested to see how he handles it.
That's what I think. That's exactly what I think makes Bobby Hebert so great. He's not pulling any punches, exactly. And I think maybe it's because he hasn't played with any of these recent guys either.
Oh yeah, no,
he still knocks his old former teammates, so probably not.
I think it definitely gets easier the further removed you are from playing. And that's why the first couple years in the broadcast booth for these guys can be difficult, because you have to just get used to it, and so that's going to be something to watch from Mark. RG3 has gone completely over to the dark side in that regard. He'll talk anything about anybody at any time.
I do enjoy it though.
Yeah, he's good. But all right, let's go back to the game, and we're going to talk about some snap counts. We're going to talk about some decisions. The first decision was kind of odd to me, and it was that the Saints, after talking about how many reps they wanted to get Trevor Penning, every rep he gets better, and the more the better, whatever. I talked to Doug Marrone and Pete Carmichael last week, and both of them, when I asked them about Trevor Penning, he says the more reps he gets, the better off he is. Well, you get to week 3 of the preseason, and he is not playing. He is not suited up, and I was surprised by that. So I asked Dennis Allen about it. This is what he said.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we've seen some improvement out of him, and I think where we're at right now with where he is, and then, you kind of take into account that, last year in the preseason, in the last preseason game, he was injured, so I felt good about where he was at and didn't want to risk putting him out there.
So
it's an interesting way to start things after we just talked about not pulling punches on stuff.
it's a strange answer.
Yeah.
Because there's no correlation between him getting hurt in the final preseason game last year and him getting hurt again because of the instance of game. Like, it's a very superstitious reason to not play somebody. But I vaguely understand it because you do just want to get to a point where he can start in a game. And if he did go out there and get hurt in this game, it would have undermined everything. And it would have been, to me, probably a devastating way to lose another season. If you, after all the work he has put in this offseason and all the rehab, if he were to go out there and sprain his ankle, even like dude get something, someone rolls up on him, and then week one, you're back where you were last year. That would have been, from a confidence perspective, brutal for the young player. So I get that. At the same time, I've always been of the philosophy that you cannot protect guys from football. If they're going to get hurt, they're going to get hurt, and you never. It's like when you're, when you're playing blackjack, and it's like, well, I'm going to sit out this hand because I have a bad feeling about it. It's like, you don't know, like, you're guessing. You're like, he has just as much likelihood of getting hurt in week one as he does this week. I do think, to some extent, it does signal that the coaching staff is at least reasonably comfortable with where he is. I had somebody ask me yesterday, what if he can't hack it at left tackle? Before the game, we got a text. What if he can't hack it at left tackle? Will you swing a trade before week one? I was like, no, he's going to be your week one starter at left tackle. It's just a question of whether he can handle it. We won't know until we see it in a full game. But if they were really concerned about what they expect from him in terms of not being able to handle it, he would have been out there. So I think that does kind of give you that indicator.
Maybe his foot was a little sore and it was precautionary.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Was he dinged up in practice?
Right.
That we didn't get that indicator. And in Dennis's defense, if this was Sean, I would say even if he was, he wouldn't have told us. I do think that if Trevor was held out for some sort of injury precaution, he would have told us, because that is something that we have established with DA is he is forthcoming on injury information. He's not going to give us all of it, but he won't stand up there and lie to us and tell us somebody is not, like, if he held somebody up for injury, he would at least give us that indicator, like, we're being very careful, whatever. He told us when Trevor missed a single 1 day of practice with injury, he told us it was a foot thing, so he wouldn't start. I don't think he'd go back on that now, but either way, he didn't get out there, and we saw a very, very struggling backup offensive line get in the game. What's in there?
What stinks is the fact too with Penning, there's no joint practices this week, and you were going up essentially against Houston Texans starter. So what better work before the regular season than a for reals, dress rehearsal against guys that are going to be starters in the NFL?
Agreed. Lewis Kidd ended up playing left tackle, I believe, and he played 70 snaps, the most snaps. I think that's because he shifted inside to guard at some point. But, the snap counts are kind of interesting. If you want to look at the receivers, you had Jontre Kirkland playing 60 snaps, Shaq Davis playing 59, A.T. Perry playing 57. And I think, these aren't in my 3 up or 3 down. I think you're kind of just the same. No one really stood out in that regard when I talked about going in. 2 of the points I was looking at going in was how does Shaq Davis and A.T. Perry stack up against each other, and how does Trevor Penning look? Well, Trevor Penning didn't play, and I don't think either Shaq Davis or A.T. Perry really did anything to establish themselves any more than they had already done. I did talk about how they ran that jet sweep in practice, and I was willing to bet money that we would see that jet sweep as Shaq Davis at some point in this game. We did see it. Did not work.
Oh, you tried at least, right?
But they did do it. They did do it, which I kept waiting for it because I was like, they wouldn't have practiced that if they weren't going to run it in this game. Shaq's probably not going to be on the roster next week. Why would they practice that if they're not going to run it out there? And they did, and it was ill-fated.
Work better at practice.
Yeah, but guy we can talk about for a second. You talk about people all you can do is take advantage of the opportunities you're given. I don't think John Trey Kirkland really had a chance to make this roster. I think he was always playing for, are you good enough to be on the practice squad and maybe have a role at some point in the future, especially as a special teamer. And I think he did that about as well as you could have hoped for him to do. I mean, the last couple games, he's been one of your, I mean, he might be the top receiver for the Saints this preseason. If I don't quote me on that, but I mean, 5 catches, 63 yards in this game, 10 targets. You know, there was between Lucas Krull and John Trey Kirkland, 25 targets. 25. I mean, Jake Haener threw the ball 38 times, which is kind of crazy considering he only played 3 quarters. But John Trey Kirkland, I think, you know, whether it's kickoff return, punt return, you know, just being a weapon. The first play of the game was a screen pass, and the second play of the game was a screen pass to John Trey that worked. You know, for a guy who showed up midway through training camp, you know, played in the XFL last year, hasn't really been given much of a shot. I think he showed really well throughout camp.
Yeah, it was one of those things. It's funny when you're blowing somebody up, and all week I know we've been talking about Shaq Davis. I was impressed coming off that Chargers game how much more he looked to be involved and thriving off of it in practice, and then not so much in the preseason finale when I think a lot of people were just expecting him to explode since he's trying to earn that one of those final roster spots. I know we'll get into it. We know with the 3 ups, 3 downs, some more, but a guy that I still lean towards your direction when you go with the draft pick in A.T. Perry over Shaq, and there was no separation in that at all in that preseason finale, so it kind of sticks that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just kind of landing where you were. Like, I don't think there's a single decision I made in terms of kind of these depth chart roster projections that I would change. You know, yeah, the one question for me is a guy like, so I did keep a Lynn Bowden Jr. on there. That's kind of you know, it's for the same reason my first roster projection had Miller Forrestall on it. It's more of a placeholder. Okay, who is that 6 wide receiver in terms of who's that returner going to be? Throughout camp, I thought, okay, Lynn Bowden is that guy. He's dealing with an injury right now. He is a veteran. You could probably bring him back regardless, even if you cut him. So I think the next couple of days is going to be interesting to see how that all shapes out. I don't want to make a ton of predictions today because tomorrow they're going to be making these cuts and it's just not worth it. But, you know, I think that's going to be something to watch. Is there's going to be a handful of players who are either veterans who you can just kind of have a handshake agreement. It's like, okay, we're going to cut you. Kind of like they did with Aldrich Roses a few years ago. It's like, we're going to cut you because we need to save this roster spot for a guy we want to stash on IR. Don't go anywhere because you're a vested veteran. Like, you aren't going to be on waivers. So we're going to bring you back at the same salary we're paying you right now. All you have to do is not go sign somewhere else tomorrow and we will bring you back. You know, and I think there's always kind of those handshake agreements in the NFL this time of year because you do have to get creative with roster spots, right? Like, I think they're going to probably try to stash Landon Young and Ryan Connolly on IR. Well, to do that, you would have to keep them on the roster. Because you're not going to sign somebody and then stash them on IR. So that's going to be something to watch. And I think a guy like Lynn Bowden, a guy like Darrell Williams, they're going to be interesting.
I guess a positive note, and we didn't really mention, I don't think, there was actually a Traquan Smith sighting.
Yes, he was there. He was in the building.
That's
I don't know if
we haven't seen him in forever even.
I don't know how huge it is. He didn't do anything.
Just the fact that he's appeared.
Maybe he just showed up to say bye to his teammates.
Maybe,
I mean,
right?
I don't know.
Last hurrah.
I took him off my roster. You know, I think he could be one of those guys where it's like, hey, stick around, don't go anywhere. You know, we're gonna bring you back when we figure out some of these numbers. Or maybe it's like, hey, go sign with the Broncos, right?
Yes, screw you guys. They just lost Jerry Jeudy. I know they're desperate over there.
Yeah, it's just a question of how desperate they are. Speaking of, you know, and you know, kind of going down, Nick Anderson got a decent amount of snaps in this game. I thought he played reasonably well. He still got the fewest defensive snaps of any active player. I think that tells you what you need to know. But I think what we saw from him, too, is what I've been trying to say all along. He's not a linebacker. He's a box safety. Like, he can't be a linebacker in the NFL. I mean, I'm sorry. He's too small. Like
But
Sam Mills is the diamond example of a small linebacker. Nick Anderson's not Sam Mills, guys. I think he needs to slim down and be a coverage box safety type player, and you'll find a way. Like, be closer to Isaiah Simmons or Landon Collins. And we've seen a guy like Isaiah Simmons not be able to find a roster. When you are a tweener like that, it's difficult. But you have to find the right side of that tween. And I think he actually did show up pretty well in coverage a couple times, I thought. And so that's how he's going to make an NFL roster when he does, if he does. Anyway.
You getting into special teams there and with the linebacker talk just made me shoot to over thinking about Zach Bond. I was surprised he was not suited up. Obviously, it's a great sign for him that he's made this roster.
Yeah, I don't think his roster spot was ever in doubt this offseason. People talk about it.
No, for sure. It was definitely a question, though, at linebacker, I feel. And maybe not for the Saints, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he played way well, actually, this offseason. I mean, in terms of you're asking him to do very specific things, and he's done them reasonably well. The question to me is, okay, do you keep Jalen Smith? Because, Jalen is a guy who probably profiles to be your Sam, your backup Sam even. How many roster spots do you have available? Is it worth it? We talked about special teams. You didn't get a single special team snap in either of these two games. So Dennis Allen himself said, if he's going to make this roster, he's going to have to play special teams, and then proceeded to not get him any special team snaps. So I don't know. I don't know what to read into that, but
he was hanging out with Trevor Penning, just talking to him.
Right. No, but he played well,
Yeah.
and Jalen Smith does the things that I think you need him to do. But if he's not on the field, what is he providing? Is he just depth? Because you're not playing him. I mean, how often do you get three linebackers on the field? Not very often. And he's not going to start over Pete Werner or DeMario. So is he just premium depth? That's a tough, I don't know. That's why I think he's got to play special teams, and we haven't seen him do it. So unless they learned enough in practice, and he's told them he's willing to do it, and he'll do it in games. I don't know, but I thought he played pretty well. He's huge. Like, you see him on the field making tackles, and you kind of lose perspective on just like when he's tackling a running back. I mean, he dwarfs them. He swallows them in the backfield. And in today's age of like undersized linebackers, it's kind of funny to see that.
If anything, I'd love to keep Jalen Smith around just to teach technique on proper tackling, because he seems to, like you were saying, he just swallows up dudes.
Yeah, it's easy to tackle when you're that big, though. Like, that's the thing. So the only other thing that I want to get into is the kicker battle. We talked to both Will Lutz and Blake Grupe. Will kind of feels a little bedraggled. I don't know. Like, I think he's tired out by this whole process. He's handled it reasonably well. I think he's still your kicker. And I think the ball is in the court of the Broncos or the Titans or one of these teams that needs a kicker for them to say, hey, we want this guy. And whether that's Will or Blake, I think both of those are NFL kickers. It almost felt like that 60-yard kick for Blake was like, all right, you want this job? Here it is. This kick is to win it, almost felt like. And, you're not going to hold against a kicker a 60-yard attempt that had the distance and missed, 6 feet to the right. But, it really did feel like, you needed to see something kind of otherworldly impressive for Blake to win that job away from a guy who has owned it for as long as he has. And a perfect preseason with a 60-yarder to his credit and a 50-yarder in the same game probably would have been that. And without it, it kind of feels like, okay, we're still where we were. We knew you could make 50-yarders. But if you end up in a game where you need that 60 and can you trust him to hit it? I mean, I know Will can make 60-yarders. We watched him do it.
Well, it was with Groupie too. It was interesting. Obviously not short, just wide right.
Oh, he had the leg, but I mean, that's kind of the deal. It's like when you're trying to kick from that far, you have to put a little bit more into it, and your rangefinder gets a little off, and you just pushed it.
Yeah, plus, like playing Madden football, the video game.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you whatever pull you hit, you got to gauge it a little bit, and he had the distance. If that was in Denver, it would have been a 70-yard kick, right?
To the right.
Yeah. He's kicked well. I like Blake. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him around, but it's just hard for me to see a team I mean, they did it with Morstead, so it's not, it's not something where they're unwilling to show a veteran in the curb and bring in a young player. But I do think it's a little more difficult to do that at kicker because they generate so many points throughout a season. Whereas a punter, it's like they can be kind of hidden by the fact that there's nothing directly coming out of it in terms of scoring. But yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Morstead too. It really is amazing that dude's still around doing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at all if he was still the Saints punter, right? Like that's, I think that's kind of the annoying thing is like, yeah, you kind of put Morstead out to pasture, but he's still one of the best punters in the league. So did you have to?
Economics of all the BS. And I know that's the big one with the Saints too. What do they want to do they want to go with a little bit of a younger guy? I can't say that, Will's this old man now at 29 and what's groupie 24.
Right.
Right.
But and you can play until you're 45 as a kicker.
The salary is a significant difference, but I don't think they're hurting right now in terms of cap space.
Yeah, you're not cutting Will because of the salary cap. Like,
right.
That's the thing. Like you're not really saving enough to say, okay, it's worth keeping the young guy so we can clear $1 million in cap space. That's not a good enough reason. He has to be the better option, like the clear better option, like Will was when you brought him in back in 2016, 2015, and he was trying to beat out Kai Forbath. And it was like, oh yeah. Will is the guy. Like clearly. We don't need Kai Forbath in this equation. I don't know why I'm being so mean to Kai Forbath. I always appreciate
because you saw him yesterday.
No, that was Kaimi Fairbairn.
Oh yeah, I got
very similar names though. I
definitely got those confused.
There's a lot of K's and I's and B's and F's. That is actually funny in terms of kicker names. Those are pretty. Those are. It's I always appreciate really kind of ironic names. Like there was a kicker named Blewett. I think he played for Pitt. I don't know if you ever played in the NFL. David Akers was always funny to me. There was a baseball player. I think he's on the Dodgers. His last name is Outman.
We just need a first baseman or who to get on first for the whole Abbott and Costello skit there.
The Outman. He goes up there and all he does is get out. Anyway, so yeah, Kai Forbath.
Hopefully he's a solid infielder and we don't worry about his bat.
Yeah. But no, so that's going to be fascinating. Like there's going to be a lot of fascinating cuts. I think we can pretty much project some of them, but how things shape up with Blake Grupe, whether he gets claimed, whether he gets traded, whether he gets cut, it's going to be something to watch either way. But all right, let's wrap up this segment on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to come back and we are going to hit the 3 up. And then we're going to hit the 3 down. We're going to go through who stood out, who fell flat in this preseason game. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. This is Inside Black and Gold. Stick around.
Out of the shotgun, Kendre Miller to Jameis's left. More pressure again. Throws it for Jimmy Graham. A little back shoulder down the right sideline. And Jimmy Graham brings it down at the 11-yard line. Christian Harris out of Baton Rouge on the tackle, but that was vintage Jimmy Graham.
Mike, was he open?
Nope.
No. There you go.
Was he open? Nope. That's Jimmy. We're back here on Inside Black and Gold. That was the highlight of Jimmy Graham catching that first pass from Jameis Winston about 25 yards downfield, went up and just I don't even want to say mossed the guy. He kind of just caught it through the guy. He literally caught it on his helmet. And so we're gonna go through the 3 up on this segment of Inside Black and Gold. And I saw Jimmy Graham. I saw Jimmy Graham out there in the pregame, and I was surprised to see him. And to me, that's a pretty good indicator. If you thought Jimmy Graham was a lock on this roster, no, because if he was a lock, he wouldn't have been playing. He was out there to prove something. And, I don't know what you were looking to find out of Jimmy Graham, but I imagine you got it.
Jimmy was nice to see, especially considering the health scare out west. You really didn't know what the issue is, and we still don't have much clarity on the whole situation. But as far as him being on the field and performing, we saw it in practice this week leading up to the preseason finale, and then to see Jimmy do what he does in the preseason finale to secure that spot on the roster. Yeah, you're right. There was nothing guaranteed until last night. I even had some family members from out of state even texting me going, what are they talking about? Graham trying to make the roster. They gave him a contract. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything at all. But yeah. I think he has secured his spot. We see that role that we know the Saints envision him in, that we've seen him in the past, but he's just not going to be that guy in bulk in black and gold anymore. He's just going to be used sparingly, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's why, you look at a Jimmy and you look at a Jalen Smith and you say, okay, if these guys aren't going to be major contributors on special teams, are they worth keeping around? I think they can both be weapons in certain areas of the field, but how valuable are those weapons, right? Like, are you taking reps? Are you taking reps away from Jawan Johnson to get Jimmy on the field? Because I don't like that idea. Are you taking, opportunities away from a Lucas Krull? Like, are you losing a Lucas Krull to keep Jimmy Graham around? I don't know. It's a little tough, but I think there was an opportunity for Jimmy Graham to go out there and lay a dud, and he didn't do it. And if you were the team and you were kind of, saying, okay, show me what you got, I think your hands are a little tied now. Because, I mean, if that wasn't what you needed to see, then why did you bring him in the first place? Like, what did he need to do to prove to you that he can still contribute other than what he did? And yeah, so it's tough. And this is what Dennis Allen had to say about Jimmy.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that we've said this, that, we don't have to see it every day from these guys, particularly the veteran players, but yet at some point we have to see it. So, and we saw it tonight. I think really probably since the Charger practices, I started to see, some signs of the mental picture that I have of Jimmy Graham. And then again, I saw it this week in practice, and I saw it carry over into the game. So that was a positive.
So that second comment is interesting to me because, to me, it sounds like they wanted to see this against the Chargers, right? Like, I think they needed to see him in a game be kind of featured to some extent. And because of the medical incident, whatever you want to call it, in LA, he wasn't able to play. So that's why he was on the field for this game. Like, he was going to play one or the other, and that's it. But I did think it was interesting. Like, it sounds to me like they needed to see that. Like, he didn't until they got to the Chargers practices, which is obviously where he had that medical incident. The vision, he said, wasn't necessarily matching up. And so I think that's interesting because, I think Jimmy did have to prove something. And
the cameras, I think it was after the touchdown, that it looked pretty emotional, even the exchange between Dennis Allen and Jimmy Graham. That validation, the relief, the joy of it all. You felt that from both. And yeah, I understand that. Obviously Dennis, I don't need to see it all the time, but I do need to see it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I did think it was funny. He like pump faked the dunk over the goalpost.
Yes.
Which, I think it's one of those situations where, if I'm going to do it, it better be worth it. And I'm not doing it now in a situation where they might use that as an excuse to not, it's like, oh, it was just a foolish decision. We're not keeping you around anymore. Like he was not going to do that this game, but I would not be surprised if late in the year, or like he catches a touchdown late in a game where you're up by two scores and it's over. And it's like, okay, the penalty is worth it, right? Like, I think he will at some point catch a touchdown and dunk it and just accept that penalty. But it's going to have to be in a situation where it's worth it, and it will definitely not cost the team. But when he does it, it's going to be, a take down the house kind of moment.
I guess we can throw this in the, 3-up, segment, but we didn't mention the fact that penalties, holy crap, this team doesn't, have to get almost every other flag that was thrown on the field going against them. Really nice to see how they clean things up. I know a lot of folks were getting on Dennis Allen saying it's indicative of, the coach, how sloppy the team looked. Well, the backups were in entirely in this game, and they looked pretty tight, so it was nice to see.
Well, that's like people were saying, oh, well, the penalties were all on backups last week. It was like, that's not an excuse. These guys are fighting to make the roster. Like,
right.
If anybody should not be having penalties, it's these guys, because they That's literally could be the difference between them making the roster and not making the roster, right? Like,
well, I think Jimmy had that in his head too and was like, psych, I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. And yeah, so they only had 2 penalties for 15 yards. I think that's what you were hoping for in terms of, you just got to be able to see these people can play without fouling, right? And so you did that.
The game moved a lot faster, thankfully.
Yes, it did. It did. That Chargers game took forever. But all right, moving on. The next guy on my 3-up list is Bryan Bresee. You know what? I think Bryan Bresee, and this game specifically is a good example of like, it's really difficult to gauge a defensive tackle's performance by just stats alone, right? Because if you look at his stat line, I mean, according to the game book, 1 tackle, 1 QB hit. Those are the stats he recorded, right? At least in the most basic form. He had several pressures. He got in there. I don't know how he didn't get a sack at any point, but he caused multiple sacks. Like that spin move is remarkable. At one point, he just broke
Where's the stat for the spin move? We don't get one for that.
I guess not. But you don't see a lot of defensive tackles ripping off spin moves like
Really
that. That's like an Aaron Donald type, athletic type move. And we, Malcolm Roach talked about it, and here it is.
Did you see it? Did you? I never saw nobody spin on the line. Like, he's spinning. Usually people work it up a few steps, then spin. He spins on the line. I told you, I said this a few days ago. Yeah, it's cat-like quickness. He's able to jump off the ball. For him being so big, it's a sight to see. It's really a sight to see. And he has been blessed with the God-given ability to be that quick at that size. And the sky's the limit for him, for real. And, man, I'm glad he's on our team.
Yeah, and I think that sums it up. Like, the stuff he's doing is not normal. And we talked to him earlier in the week, and he was like, one of the most amazing things about Bryan Bresee, he doesn't even know what he's doing yet. He's just in there causing havoc. And I think we've kind of said all along, he's going to be a bigger impact in the pass rush part of the game, third downs early in his career. The run defense is where I have more questions. But, if that's where you need him, and he showed out in this game, no question.
Was super excited to see, obviously, the spin. And as even Roach was recounting stuff and talking about it, got a little bit of chill bumps, because obviously you hear a player's praise is he's not going to be boosting this guy for no reason kind of thing. We've seen flashes, obviously, throughout camp to put it together in that game scenario. Great. And man, even number 55 showing up in the preseason finale. The other rookie.
Yeah, he was on my list as an honorable mention. One of the things I said going in was I don't need to see a huge game out of Isaiah Foskey, but I do need to see some positive moments. I do need to write down his name at least once, right? And he teamed up with Bryan Bresee on 2 of those sacks. I think he actually got credit for one of them. He did. He got 1 sack. I think he got 2 half sacks, and that's how it ended up being 1 sack. But yeah, no, he was there. He was in the backfield. He was causing pressure. There was one play where it was Bryan Bresee, kind of pressuring up the middle, and he was driving his defender into the, onto the kind of outside shoulder of Davis Mills. And he just, caused enough traffic and pressure that Mills just overthrew his receiver. And like, you're not going to get much on that play. I don't even know if they'll technically give you a pressure, but like, as a defensive lineman, that's a win for you, is to make life more difficult on the quarterback. And we just hadn't seen him do it. And so, Dennis Allen went out of his way. He got a question about Bryan Bresee, and he made sure to throw in, I thought Isaiah had a really nice game today. He's taken a lot of steps forward. Even if you don't see it, he has improved from where he was at the start of camp, at the start of OTAs to now. Like, even if, from an outsider's perspective, you don't always kind of appreciate the steps he's taken forward, they are there. And so, like, to me, it's like you're not going to see a ton of snaps for Isaiah Foskey in the regular defense when everybody is healthy. And it's just like I feel like he needed some sort of a confidence building moment, especially after getting effectively called out by his coach against the Chargers, and for a play that he felt like Isaiah should have been able to make, and he didn't on Easton Stick. I think he did that today. He kind of walked it forward in the way you needed him to. So he was my honorable mention. He wasn't my 3rd up player, but he was definitely on the honorable mention list, along with Lucas Krull, who I thought had a nice game, but did leave some opportunities on the table for the second week in a row.
Well, they got Pepper enough with enough targets, right?
15 targets, right? Like you look at it, and you say 7 catches, 106 yards. That is a heck of a game.
Yeah.
But that's not even a 50% catch rate. He got 15 targets. And, we're going to talk about Jake Haener's performance in the 3 down segment. Not all of those targets missed were on Lucas. Like I would say a majority of them weren't. They were not good throws or uncatchable, whatever. One was left behind him. 2 of them were interceptions. But there was 2 plays that were just straight kind of, one of them was he was diving and going out of bounds, but he got both hands on the ball. He seemed to lose focus and it hit the ground. And, then there was another one where he went up high and it got kind of raked out just like it did against the Chargers. And, those are the type of plays that's like, man, you had a chance to have a huge game. Just like you did last week. You had 10 targets last week. You got 4 of them. Or no, you had 8 targets last week. You got 4 of them. And 2 of them were balls you should have caught. In this case, you had 15 targets. You caught 7 of them, and 2 of them were balls you should have caught. So, leaving those types of plays on the table when you are a fringe guy trying to make a roster is not where you want to be. He still had a very good game. He still does stuff that I am very impressed with on a regular basis. But one of the reasons he's not one of my 3-up players is you can't leave those opportunities on the table.
Definitely. And yeah, the end of the game, I'm sure a lot of fans were doing the same thing as us, going, throw it to someone else for crying out loud. Anybody.
It's not even about Lucas. It's about the fact that everyone on the field, including the Texans, knew you were going to throw to Lucas Krull. It was baffling to me. And we'll talk about Haener. We don't have to get too into it now. But yeah, it was a rookie moment for him in that it kind of locked in. But you like to see the connection. It's a good connection. If you can keep Lucas Krull around and maybe Jake Haener is your quarterback in a couple of years, that's not a bad thing to have a really good connection with a young guy. But getting into the last stock up player before we go onto the negative Nancy portion of the program, Jordan Howden. One of the things that gets underappreciated in these preseason games is you're making the roster on special teams. We can talk about Lucas Krull catching all those passes. Lucas Krull's not going to get chances to catch passes in the game, even if you keep him on the roster. His biggest role is going to be on special teams. And so a lot of times these last few roster spots are going to be won on special teams. And if you were unsure about who was going to be that kind of depth safety, we saw JT Gray go out with an injury. I don't know. We don't know exactly what it is, but if he ends up having to miss time, you're going to have someone step up on special teams. And I saw Jordan Howden get downfield on back-to-back punts and make solo tackles with the defender not able to get out of his cleats. And I think that's impressive. And it's something that, as a rookie, how do you establish yourself on a roster? I think he's a 5th round pick, right? He's not a no brainer keep. You'd like to keep your 5th round picks around, but they have to show something to be a part of this roster. They cut Jordan Jackson last year. So it's not a guarantee that just because you're drafted, and A.T. Perry's kind of in that boat now. I thought Jordan Howden showed well, and he's been a guy that's tackled well throughout preseason. He's built well for a rookie. He's got an NFL-ready body. And so I think if there was any question about him in his role, I think he kind of cemented it right there.
No, you mentioned that key, too, with being special teams, where obviously he's going to be leaned on most heavily right off the bat. I guess some honorable mentions, dude, I'll mention real quick. I thought Alontae Taylor with those 2 pass breakups were pretty impressive. Definitely love seeing that from him. And then our boy Nico Lalos keeps showing out, putting up those stats, which we do see. You mentioned those numbers, those hidden numbers. With Bresee, we don't see all the time the pressures or whatever causing havoc he's doing up front. Lalo's a dude that's definitely been showing up, getting sacks. I think he might lead the team in the preseason in that aspect. And then another one I want to give a shout out, Nephi Sewell, another dude that just seems to get the job done. I don't know about, 53, but I definitely want to keep him around if possible.
I think Nephi Sewell's on the 53. I think he's your backup will linebacker. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think Jalen Smith is your will linebacker. And that's why it becomes difficult to keep him around, because I think you're also keeping DeMarco around. So
right.
Like what you can say about DeMarco and Nephi is they will both contribute on special teams. Nephi Sewell had 2 individual tackles in this game on special teams. And so they're not, even if they don't get on the field, they have a role. And that's kind of where you have to figure it out. But I agree with you. I think Nephi played pretty well. So one thing we didn't talk about in the open that is worth mentioning in terms of, who played, who didn't. Paulson Adebo didn't play. And I think if you were looking for a definitive in terms of, okay, where is this CB2 competition standing? That's it. Yeah, if you were still competing for that, you would have had Paulson out there, because here's the thing. If Alante, if you were to turn around and give the job to Alante, Paulson would be like, well, why didn't I play that? Why didn't I get a chance to compete for that job if you're not going to give it to me? So to me, that's whether they'll admit it or not, whether the coaching staff will say, okay, Paulson's our starter week 1, and maybe you don't, maybe there's some subterfuge going on where you'd want to keep it under, keep it close to the vest as long as possible. It's Paulson. And I feel vindicated in that, because when I said that in the before the start of training camp, I got raked over the coals. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, the fans are quick to turn when they don't agree with you. That means you're an idiot and you know nothing what you're talking about, because you're not saying what they feel.
Right. And to be fair, I do get stuff wrong. But when I feel like I had a pretty good read on that from the start. And so I'm not I'm gonna own that one. But all right, is that anyone else you want to highlight before we move on to the bad stuff?
No, I'm sure everyone, if you want to, just go to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. That highlight to me was a big one for Alante Taylor, being able to knock that pass from Nico Collins, was it, I think, over on the sideline?
I don't know.
I believe that was the case, but it definitely, you see the hand forming the fist, able to punch it out. Beautifully done. That's one of those things that get you all excited, obviously to have something like that discount at one of those big chunk plays that could have been happening to you.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's another thing, and this is not about the Saints, but anyone who's listened to this podcast throughout the offseason knows how I feel about Tank Dell. And that I retweeted it because it was just like that. I watched it live and I didn't even see it as well as I wish I had, because I was watching the coverage downfield, and all of a sudden I look up and Tank Dell is going the complete opposite direction. And the cut he made on that kick return or that punt return, and it's just like Dak Wood had him dead to rights, and then he's just gone. He just stops on a dime and goes the opposite direction. And that's the kind of stuff I saw at the Senior Bowl that was I want that guy. Give me that guy. Yeah. He's going to be a good player. We're going to be talking about Tank Dell for a while, but anyway, I don't need to fangirl over Tank anymore. He's on the other team.
Yeah, this isn't the Texans podcast, for crying out loud.
I need to go on a Texans podcast and brag
and rave about him. Right? I knew all along.
I knew it. You thieves stealing your hometown player away from anybody else. Anyway, all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to talk 3 down. Okay.
Negative Nelly time.
Yeah, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Subscribe. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment ahead of Cut Down Day, and that's why the 3 down segment, it's tough to write, and and you can read it on WWL.com. I don't like trashing players. I really don't. It's not something I enjoy doing. The Saints have an issue on their hands when it comes to the backup offensive line. And I would not be surprised at all to see them be active on the waiver wire, maybe even swing a trade. If there's a cut coming in that they like a player and they want to jump the line, because you get injuries at the offensive line every year, and outside of Andres Pete, who I don't think had a great day, but at least you have higher expectations for what he can do than some of the other guys. Man, I don't. If you end up having to start some of these guys, I don't know. It's painful. Even a guy like Storm Norton, who has experience and you brought in, I mean, he's getting eaten alive at right tackle. I don't want to single anyone out because I don't think anyone played well on the offensive line. But that's a group that, if I do not have, my stock on them was already kind of, and just, it was rough to watch.
Totally agree there. Not much more to say except the fact I'll pile on to that with the fact that I'm throwing in the decision not to play Penning in the stock down just for the sheer fact that I don't get it. You wanted these snaps to get him that experience, those reps going into the real deal. And the Houston Texans were playing starter. So what not? It just seemed like a great opportunity for him. I understand the fear of injury, but we kind of mentioned this off camera going into the show. It's football. There's going to be contact, and you can't go out trying to avoid that.
So your stock is down on Penning, or your stock is down on the decision making?
The decision making, yeah, not down on Penning.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Can't blame him.
Yeah, because I was like, what did he do? What did Trevor do? Like, that seems unfair. Yeah, no, I mean, again, we talked about this. I don't necessarily hate the idea of making sure he gets to the regular season healthy. But it's silly. It's kind of like it's a very superstitious way to go about that. It's like when a pitcher runs off the field and like won't step on the line, the foul line. It's like, what would happen if you did, right? Like it's silly, but you still, like, in their mind, it makes perfect sense, and that's all that matters. So, I'd like to think that it's a vote of confidence for Trevor. Like, you kind of look at it as, if I'm Trevor Penning and they say, yeah, we don't need to see anything more from you, take a day off. Maybe that in his head is helpful. And he has a little more confidence because he feels like the coaches are behind him. That's my positive spin on it. But I agree with you.
Yeah, but the Texans don't have Carl Granderson, so you don't have to worry about it.
That's true. Carl has been eating his lunch a little bit. Another guy who didn't play, Carl Granderson.
Right.
So I don't have any. Actually, I probably do have an honorable mention. Who was it? Oh, my honorable mention from this is totally unfair, but I did want to talk about the kicker battle in this competition. So my honorable mention is Blake Grupe, which is completely unfair. Like, my stock is not down on Blake Grupe, but he did miss an opportunity. And when you miss an opportunity, just like Lucas Grell last week, you're in there. But my next stock down player, I actually have two in this one, and it's what I call the disappearing defensive backs, which, Adrian Fry was already probably pretty low on my stable of defensive backs. He might be at the bottom, if I'm being honest, but even by those standards, he had a rough day. He had that penalty, one of the two penalties, that was him in coverage. And that fumble on the punt, John Trey was running up. I think he was calling poison or whatever the word is to get out of the heckin' way. And Adrian clearly didn't hear him. He continued to block his player, which is like, when he's calling for a fair catch, just get out of the way. I mean, like, it doesn't matter if that guy's gonna blow him up, because if he does, that's a penalty. Good for you. You win that exchange. Just go away. And he didn't. And like, they overturned it to, but it was
Luckily, right.
And it's the type of play that's like, your role is on special teams. For a guy like Adrian Fry to mess up on special teams is a far more significant thing than for him to get a penalty in coverage, because if he's going to make this team or get snaps on this team, that's where it's going to be. And that's the type of thing that can lose you a game. So that was rough. The other one for me is Smoke Monday. And he's a guy who I don't think had a bad game, but I needed to see something. I needed to see him make a play, show up somewhere. He brands himself as a hitter. I have not seen any real hits. I have seen one really poorly executed tackle. But he's a guy who I wanted to be finishing the preseason and saying Smoke has made himself very difficult to cut. And I just can't. There's nothing I can point to say, yeah, this guy should be on the roster because of this, other than he's got a fun name to say. So he's my other. This is kind of a twofer. So it's Adrian Fry and Smoke Monday, both kind of they didn't get the job done.
No, like you said, Fry was definitely a guy that was abused yesterday. Well, in the preseason finale, and then you look at Smoke Monday. I feel like when I see him out there, he's always trying to be that dude that makes the kill shot instead of just make the play. Instead of he going for the big play. I appreciate obviously wanting to be a difference maker kind of thing, but you still got to be sure at the basics kind of thing. And like I said, I feel like he's just going for the kill shot too much.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's still effectively a rookie. I think that's something to keep in mind is, He didn't play last year. Like, he's a second-year player, but he spent all year on the injured list. So I think that's kind of how you have to look at it. Is this is his rookie season, and you probably put him on the practice squad, and maybe throughout the season there's opportunities for him to get brought up and make a play. I don't know, but yeah, for now I feel very comfortable with him on the cut line in my projections. But yeah, young players, they're going to make mistakes. They learn from them. But my problem with Fry specifically is I've seen him make the same mistakes over and over again. Yeah, he's a guy that struggled.
Yeah, totally. Like, I agree with that, because just you look at the pecking order of this deep secondary, which it is, and he wasn't one of those guys that we were raving about, kind of thing.
No. My last stock down player is, we mentioned we're going to talk about him, and stock down is kind of unfair. Like, my stock is not necessarily down on Jake Haener, but if your stock was super high, which mine wasn't necessarily, I think I've been very realistic about the expectations for Jake Haener. I think if you didn't think he was playing like a rookie, like if you thought that he was going to avoid a rookie-like performance and make some rookie mistakes, well, you got that today. You threw to Lucas Krull 15 times, and while there's a connection there, and he did get open a good bit, the last like 4 or 5 were forced. 2 of them were interceptions. The most egregious one was that first interception, because it almost looked like, we watched him lead a 2-minute drive at the Superdome on Friday. And the last play kind of looked like that play where he just kind of lobbed it up into the back of the end zone. The difference is this play happened on 1st and 10 at the 2-minute warning at the Texans 24-yard line. He threw the ball in triple coverage. The Texan safety, I can't recall his name, Arnold, I believe. He just fielded it like a punt. I mean, it was the easiest interception he's ever had, and he ever will have. The next drive, he had a chance to take another one, and he dropped it. The same guy, and then Jake obviously got undercut by Cam Dantzler, I believe, to end the game. And like, everyone on the field knew what Jake Haener was looking at on these plays, and that was frustrating. He did have very shoddy protection. That's something that's worth noting. But, you're not just going to say, well, the protection wasn't good, so we're not going to hold any of these decisions against him. Like, you're still gauging the quality of the decisions, and they weren't good.
No, and like you said, the roller coaster of the rookie ride, you just got to hope Haener, recognizes the issues, corrects it, moves on, kind of thing. But I don't know. I was kind of joking watching the game with Bobby Hebert that I think that Lucas Krull might have been the only player he could see, since maybe the guy he couldn't see over guys, kind of thing. So it's like, oh, there's Krull. I'll keep throwing it that way. It just
you can
really
see the top of his helmet, so he's going to throw it to.
Yeah, it was just really awkward towards the end there. And like we talked about briefly, it's the fact that everybody, including the Texans, knew where he was going with the damn ball.
And it worked a lot early on, but then it became very obvious. But yeah, and so one of the things I wrote about in my column is like, rookie mistakes are good, because that's how you learn. You make the mistakes and you learn from them. You don't make them again, but you have to make them first. And one of the things that impressed me was, in a lot of instances, you'll see a rookie struggle in a game and they're going to dodge the media. They're not going to talk to the media. He did not have to talk to the media after that game. He was not the starting quarterback, and he is a rookie. He could have easily ducked out the back and avoided this. He did not. He after getting changed, his locker was already cleaned out. He came back into the locker room to talk to the media. And to me, that's like, there's certain things that you look for in a starting quarterback. And one of them is accountability. And, it's something you either have or you don't. It's a mental thing where it's like, okay, I need to answer for this and I need to talk about it. And he did. And so let's play that interview right here, and we can listen to it really quick.
Opportunity to get reps and go learn and see different defenses and different speeds and different things up front. I think it's a really good opportunity for me to grow and make the mistakes that I need to make to learn. And obviously tonight didn't go our way, and I made some decisions that I wish I had back, but that's part of this game. And I'm a rookie, and I got to learn, and I got to go with the ups and the downs, and take what's there. But I'm glad that I had a really good group up in front that was fighting for me all night, and the guys outside on AT to Lucas to John Trey, they all did their part to try to help me tonight, and it just didn't go our way.
What do you think about Lucas's game? Obviously, people got to see it a little bit tonight. Seeing a little bit of that all throughout game.
Yeah, no, I think Lucas does a really good job. He's been battling a little bit of aches and pains here and there, and he always comes out and is giving me his best effort. And I appreciate the work he's put in this camp and the work that we put in together this off season. And the crazy part is I've never been through around a cusp before, but some guys may be here and some may not be here. So just got to grow with the guys that you're around and appreciate the relationships you build on the way and keep learning from it.
What areas do you feel like you still need to grow in?
You think about it, I've been in this offense for 25 practices, and I felt like I had a really productive camp. I felt like I did a lot of really good things, and obviously tonight with a little learning lesson to grow from and improve on. And I'm not going to let one bad game affect how I feel about being in this city and affect how my training camp's gone. I've done a really good job protecting the football and putting guys in positions to make plays, and tonight just didn't work out for us. So go watch the tape, get better, and improve, and that's all you can do.
How was that Gatorade?
Yeah, got me a little bit. I got a couple elbows now, so yeah. I thought I was going to get a flag, but I obviously didn't. So just trying to do my best, get the ball down the field, and try to get some points for our team.
Very glad you were able to at least flash the wheels there.
Felt like I needed to unhitch the trailer a little bit. It caught me by surprise. The middle kind of voided and made a guy miss, and ended up making a play, so it was good.
Jake, I don't know if you look forward at all, but have you talked to anyone about just kind of like what role you might have in the season? Because I know when they have three quarterbacks, sometimes
I'm just going day by day. I think I've shown them that I can be productive and do a lot of really good things, and I don't think they expect things to just happen overnight for a rookie. I think you got to go in, you got to learn, you got to go, like I said, through the ups and the downs, and I think I've had a lot more good than I've had bad this camp, and you guys have seen it. You guys have been there every single practice, and I think there's a lot to learn from, a lot to grow from, but there's a good foundation where we're starting, so just keep getting better.
Is it tough to it's going to be a while before you get another chance after putting it together? Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. I'm a competitor, and every chance I get, I want to be on the field making plays. And the crazy thing in this league is you never know when your opportunity is going to come. And I'm going to prep like I'm the starter every single week and do everything I can to learn from guys like Jameis and Derek. And if there's at some point, any point during the season that I have an opportunity to go play and do something, I'm going to be ready, and I'm going to put the preparation in to give myself the best opportunity to go play well.
So I saw you making some weird looks there. So he's referring to that long run he had where he ended up getting knocked into the Gatorade cooler, and he said he has a couple elbows, which just has like a bump, like a big bump on his arm where he hit so that's why he said he has a couple elbows, which is a weird. I've never heard anyone say that before. But no, like I think
the other question I had there when he talked about, I thought I was going to get a flag. Was he talking about the fact that the defender was going to get a flag on him for like excessive...
for like a late hit, like pushing him out of bounds?
Okay. Yeah, because that one
it was close. He was still in bounds when he got pushed, but he just based on how far he flew out of bounds, you could probably he was going out and he got pushed. It's on the fringe. Sometimes you get that call, sometimes you won't. Rookie quarterbacks usually don't. If it was Pat Mahomes, you're getting that call, right? So that's kind of where you look at it. But it was a nice run. I think they flashed up the speed on the Superdome, like the Jumbotron or whatever you want to call it, and it was like 18.6 miles per hour. It's pretty quick for a quarterback. And I think if you want to take positives away from that, which there were positives, he didn't play completely poorly. He dealt with, a shoddy offensive line. I think he extended some plays. I think when you see him get outside the pocket and kind of use his legs, that's where you can really see the flashes of like, oh yeah, this guy could be an NFL quarterback. Just the way he moves and the way he keeps his eyes downfield. He never seems panicked. He never seems rushed. And I think he just kind of got too locked in on one guy in this game. And, I don't know. That's kind of a strange thing. But I think that is kind of a rookie. You get a comfort zone and you try to stay within it. And that's what he did. But I think his approach is really, really good. And, I'm not like I have him in the stock down portion. Again, it's not because I'm out on Jake Haener. It's because, if your idea was that he was going to be perfect and he was a guy who right away you're like, oh, NFL starter right now, let's do it. No, I mean, he's got a lot to learn and he's got time to learn it. And that's what I think that's kind of what you saw today. I also had one person on Twitter be like, well, he's starting behind 8th string offensive lineman. No, he's been playing behind the same offensive line all 3 weeks. This is not a situation where suddenly he's playing behind guys they found on the streets. The same guys.
The one other comment that stood out to me is when he was talking about Lucas Kroll. It seemed, at least I got a vibe off of that, they kind of developed a relationship, a tight relationship already. And maybe I'm just thinking out, too much, that, hey, he was trying to feed him a bit to help him kind of make the roster. I don't know, but it definitely seemed like he had this relationship he had built up with Kroll, and maybe, hey, I'm going to keep tossing him the ball to try and get him some help.
I mean, I think he was just open a lot, and he threw to him, and then it kind of just became like that's who he's looking to. I don't think that it was like a ploy to try to get him on the roster, but I do think that you do kind of, when you're throwing to guys a lot, like he's working with a third teamers. So was Lucas Kroll, and that's who he gets a lot of opportunities to throw to. So he feels comfortable throwing to him. Lucas is a guy who's been hurt. He had a tailbone injury, he missed some time. And so it's good to see him out there and getting those reps. But I mean, he threw to him a lot against the Chargers too. It's nothing new. Like he led the team in targets last week. So it's just his guy he likes to throw to.
With Kroll, it's going to be interesting. I think everyone kind of has that belief that if he does get, let go, that the Pittsburgh Steelers, because of that connection with their quarterback, obviously could come a calling because they played at Pitt.
Bobby keeps saying that.
Right, exactly. I don't know if Pittsburgh's paying that much attention to Steelers.
Right, like I get the idea, like I get where he's coming from, but he's been on the practice squad. They could sign him if they wanted. Like there's nothing that prevented them from doing that this offseason if they wanted to get him. Like, why now would they suddenly be like, oh, we got to get Lucas Kroll? I don't think that's why you bring in a guy because they played together in college, but you never know. I think a 100-yard receiving performance is going to catch some eyes, regardless.
So a few people's attention, right?
Yeah, I mean, like that's just something that if you were unaware of Lucas Kroll, and they're the only game on TV, this was national TV. A lot of people watch this game, and so if there was teams out there that are in need of a young, dynamic tight end, they're like, oh, okay, who's this guy? And so for that reason alone, I could see him getting claimed. I don't think it's going to be because the Steelers want to give rebuild that Pittsburgh connection, but hey, who knows? Either way, Jake Haener threw 2 interceptions. He had some nice moments, but there was mistakes in this game. There's no question about it, and you're going to learn from it. The question becomes, when's the next time you see him in a game? And
talk to you this time next year.
I would bet it's next preseason. We'll have to see, but that's it for me. Was there anyone else you wanted to mention before we get out of here?
No, that was definitely a pretty good summation of the downs, the stock downs. Just really excited now. We get a weekend off and kind of recoup and get ready for the real deal, and back in the Superdome for week 1. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I mean we get a week off kind of, but yeah, cuts are on Tuesday. So if you're listening to this Tuesday evening, then they may have already happened. So it's part of the reason I didn't want to come on here and do a bunch of this guy gets cut, because I'd like to think there's more time to listen to this based on what we talked about. But yeah, it's going to be something, and we'll probably next podcast be able to go over the 53-man roster. So that's something you should expect later in the week.
One shout out, I guess, honorable mention, stock down. Saints running game still hasn't really been impressive all around. I'm not going to pinpoint one person other than Jake Haener and maybe Alvin Kamara in game 1. I don't think anybody's really been able to put up decent numbers.
See, I lump that in with the offensive line. I think
absolutely right.
I'm not holding the run game against Ellis Merriweather and Kendre Miller. Adam Prentice actually had a couple nice runs and he got hurt.
True.
I mean, like your offensive line is a big part of your running game being successful. And I think that's part of the reason you see teams hesitant to pay running backs, because if you pay your running back, but you can't afford to pay, a top end guard, well, how good can your running game be if you're not blocking for him? And like I think that's where the value equation gets tough. But yeah, I mean, I think I've liked what I've seen out of Kendre. I think the pass protection from the running backs has been solid. But yeah, I mean, just the run game in general, in terms of the production, has definitely not been what you wanted to see.
Yeah, I think
the Texans ran the ball all over the place.
It's like 2.6, 2.7 a carry, not just running backs, kind of looking at the preseason. And like you said, I do obviously lump that in hugely with the offensive line.
Yeah, like Jake Haener is going to raise that average significantly on his one run for like 35 yards. But that's obviously not the same question. But they'll take it.
Hey, they all count, right? The rushing yards all
count.
The
yards count the same. But all right, let's wrap up this episode of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow him at Steve Geller WWL. This is Inside Black and Gold. Again, we just went over the 3 up, 3 down. We're going to be coming back later in the week with a breakdown of who made the 53-man roster and what are our expectations for that. So check that out later in the week. Find the latest content over at WWL.com and always listen to WWL Saints Radio at AM 870 FM 105.3 and on the Audacy app, where you can find this podcast and all those other podcasts. So check out that app. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Who dat? Go Saints. Pet a cat.
We've made it to the real deal. Hallelujah.
Peace, y'all.